Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm sorry that you got drawn into such a Python-esque sketch show there, but it is indicative of some of the situation that I feel that we are in with the government today. They are absolutely all over the place on this issue. And I couldn't quite believe that the Minister opposite said that the government was taking this seriously. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, we wouldn't be here today if there was any sense whatsoever that the government took this issue seriously. They have not taken this issue seriously, and that has been the case for years. So I thank the official opposition for bringing this debate today. And it feels as though we've spoken quite a lot about economic crime in the past few weeks, but this particular motion could not be more topical and more significant. And during the sanctions debate yesterday afternoon, members across this House rightly made clear that we have no quarrel with the people of Russia, and I would like to start by reiterating that today. The city of Glasgow has been twinned with Rostov-on-Don since 1986, hosting exchanges and working together to build those bonds of friendship. And this is a city now which finds itself on the Russian front line, and my thoughts are with residents there, as well as, of course, with everyone in Ukraine, who must be very fearful of what more is to come after 8 years of hostile action by Russian forces. And we are very clear on these benches that Ukraine and its sovereignty must be respected and its people protected from Russian aggression. Yeah. And I was very struck that all sides in the House yesterday, perhaps by the Minister, that members stood up to say that sanctions against 5 banks and 3 individuals was not enough. They are quite clearly not enough. Because these individuals have been on the US sanctions list since 2018, and they're hardly likely to find this additional step a surprise or indeed an inconvenience. It was billed that post-Brexit the UK would be able to act in a nimble fashion and sanction more and more individuals as they saw fit, but it seems we're not even going as far as the EU. Germany ending Nord Stream 2 yesterday was a hugely significant move. European Union foreign ministers agreeing unanimously on Tuesday to sanction 27 Russians and entities, as well as banks, the defence sector, and limiting Russian access to European capital markets. The EU's measures will also target as many as 351 members of the Russian Duma, as well as individuals and businesses linked to Russian actions in the separatist regions. And I appreciate that the Prime Minister said at PMQs and the Foreign Secretary said this morning that they're going to escalate this in the event of full-scale invasion. But by the time this happens, Madam Deputy Speaker, that invasion will have happened and it will be far too late.
Does the member agree with me that it is important, as far as possible, that Britain acts in concert with its allies? And it is therefore extremely strange that this government has come forward with a weak packet of sanctions, but the European Union has got a very strong package.
I agree with him completely. This is very weak, and commentators across the board have described them as very weak. And I will, of course.
Just to add to that point, but doesn't this whole crisis indicate the strategic malfunction of the Conservative Party's obsession with the European Union over the years, especially considering all the negative energy that's consumed politics in this place over the last 5 years in terms of the fallout with Brexit? We've taken our eye off the ball on the biggest foreign policy challenges that this country, well, the UK faces, the state faces.
He's absolutely correct in that, and I think there is a real need to work together on this, and the UK has been several steps behind, unfortunately. And I note with interest that it was reported that shares in Russia's 2 biggest banks went up yesterday in relief that they weren't targeted. And the 5 banks targeted represent a mere fraction of the Russian banking sector. Only 1 of the 5 is on the Russian Central Bank's list of systemically important credit institutions. Black Sea Bank is Russia's 197th largest bank by assets. IS Bank 155th and Gen Bank is 92nd, hardly the biggest fish to go after. Ministers have assured us that there will be a ratchet process, but it feels to many as if they are not moving as fast or taking enough action to make a real impact here. And those cronies and oligarchs who have money to shift will no doubt be doing so already. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Dmytro Kuleba, has tweeted this morning, "To stop Putin from further aggression, we call on partners to impose more sanctions on Russia now. First decisive steps were taken yesterday, and we are grateful for them. Now the pressure needs to step up to stop Putin. Hit his economy and cronies. Hit more, hit hard, hit now." The UK government should listen to that plea from our allies. There was much talk during the statements yet recently of military action, of sending tanks and guns, and while those may be of immediate assistance in an escalating scenario with tens of thousands of Russian troops on the march, we must not neglect to tackle a long-standing scandal on the doorstep of this Parliament, which has allowed President Putin to gather his strength and finance his corrupt regime. And what frustrates me and other colleagues across this House, anti-corruption experts in the field and the Glasgow Central constituents who email me, is the lack of action and urgency on illicit finance. This UK government alone has this responsibility, and they have not taken the ample opportunities they have had over years to stop the flow of Russian dirty money through the City of London. The Minister told the Treasury Select Committee that he was not happy, and we are not happy either. They have had the Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Bill, on which I sat, where they could have taken stronger measures. They did not. They had the Registration of Overseas Entities Bill, still waiting for action. They have had ample opportunity to reform Companies House, to tackle SLPs, and the lack of investment in enforcement agencies, because people are getting away with this through lack of proper enforcement. One of the most egregious examples, of course, is the Russian laundromat case, and some 113 Scottish limited partnerships played critical roles in the massive Russian money laundering scheme that moved $20.8 billion out of Russian banks. One of those involved was Igor Putin, cousin to the Russian president. And I would like to pay tribute to my former colleague in this House, Roger Mullen, who did so much to tackle the scourge of misuse of SLPs, along with the researcher Richard Smith and the journalist David Leask. The UK government's actions to tackle this were painfully slow, and they have still yet not nailed the issue of the abuse of SLPs or the lack of enforcement in persons of significant control. And money has been taken from Ukraine recently via SLPs as well. Some £36 million in a scam being investigated by authorities last year ended up in the bank account of the SLP Rimini Consulting. Madam Deputy Speaker, let's not kid ourselves here. This is profitable business. The lack of enforcement is what has allowed an industry to flourish unchecked in the leagues of enablers right here in the UK. And as the journalist David Leask has pointed out, and I quote, "The mundane, unhappy reality is that we have outright crooks and a fair number of white-collar professionals happy not to look too closely at where money comes from. These enablers here in Scotland and in England are a threat to the UK and to the wider world. They corrode our democracy and distort our markets, and they are laced through our society. They are company formation specialists, corporate lawyers and accountants who provide financial services to oligarchs, gangsters and corrupt politicians. They rarely think of themselves as bent, but that is what they are, ethically, if not legally." End quote. The UK government can't talk seriously about tackling illicit finance if it doesn't go after those who enable it. And they ought to start by looking in their own coffers, to the donations with dubious sources and to those whose funds allow them to come into the government's inner circle. And the Conservative Party have accepted nearly £2 million in donations of Russian-linked money, at least, since the Prime Minister came to office in 2019. A quarter of the Cabinet reportedly having Russian-linked donations. Now, the Prime Minister said, and the Minister said, no, these were legitimate donations from British citizens. But when you've handed them golden visas first, before you get the money, that completely undermines the whole principle. I've got constituents that wait for years for a visa, but yet if you've got enough money, you can waltz right in and do what you like. In response to questioning on a photo taken, I will indeed.
That point, and we both sat with increasing incredulity during the Treasury Select Committee hearings on economic crime. But does she share my frustration at the seeming inability of the government opposite to act on any of its stated concerns?
Yes, I absolutely agree with her, and the evidence is there. The evidence is so clear, but yet the action is non-existent. It just isn't being done. Of course.
Before she moves on this issue of golden visas, prior to the tiered scheme, there was the old UK investor visa, introduced in 1994. It ran through the end of the major years, Blair, Brown, Cameron, and all of the Prime Ministers since, and now the Tier 1 visa scheme is being done away with. Is she as frustrated as I am, given the issue of dirty Russian money isn't new, that the action is always too late and never quite enough?
He's absolutely correct. There are several steps behind those who wish to bend the rules and wash their money through the City of London. And this morning, in response to questioning on a photo taken with Lyubov Chernukin, the wife of Putin's former finance minister, the Foreign Secretary said, I think we've got to be very careful to distinguish between those who are supporters of the regime, those who are propping up Vladimir Putin, and those people who have moved from Russia years ago and who are part of the British political system. Well, I would gently suggest to the government that when those oligarchs and good pals of President Putin are seen by the British Foreign Secretary as being part of the British political system, it really does illustrate the scale of difficulty that the Conservative Party has got itself into.
Just on this particular individual, it does seem to me odd that dual nationals can give vast amounts of money, especially when there are when they have hidden nearly all of their assets from clear view, and when, on top of that, it is pretty clear that a lot of their ownership has sprung from time prospering under Putin.
He's absolutely correct, and no questions seem to be asked about this money, where it's come from, the legitimacy of it, who it really belongs to, even in the end. And, for example, a notable absence from the Prime Minister's sanctions announcement was any commitment to extend them to those Tory party donors. And Maximilian Hess, a fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute, has described some Russian business people as a champagne glass removed from Westminster's political elite. And it comes to Scotland too. At a Tory Black and White Party Black and White ball in 2018, the then Scottish Conservative leader, Ruth, now Baroness Davidson, auctioned off a lunch with herself to Lyubov Chernukin. She bid £20,000 to win that lunch with Baroness Davidson. And it's said that Baroness Davidson has not yet even come good on that lunch. But if the £20,000 has been accepted, it's a significant donation, whether or not sandwiches, cakes and tea have been taken. The Prime Minister repeatedly refused to allow publication of the report by the Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee in the run-up to the 2019 general election, with the Times quoting sources suggesting that his reluctance was due to his embarrassment at the links the committee had discovered between Conservative Party donors and the Kremlin. And his government is yet to act on the recommendations of that report. To make matters worse, the Tory Elections Bill will water down the Electoral Commission and make foreign donations easier. So the denial that they have just now that it's not foreign money, that's not even going to stand when this bill comes into force.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. She's making an excellent speech. Does she share my concerns that when the Prime Minister's spokesperson was questioned around these donations, they just repeated the same answer, that due diligence had been met? But when questioned, OK, so what is due diligence then? What does that actually comprise of and what is involved in it? They were unable to actually give an answer.
Yes, and she's absolutely correct. And it's a disrespect to everybody who donates with honesty to political parties in this country. Those small donors that give a tenner or put money into a raffle or all the rest of it, that so little is asked by way of these absolutely massive donations that run to the heart of our democracy and compromise this very place in which we sit in today. The government must also act on the economic crime bill. We've heard earlier that it will be in the next session. We've heard before it will be when parliamentary time allows. Well, there's been tons of parliamentary time these past couple of years, and yet no economic crime bill. And the disappearance of this bill was part of the reason that Lord Agnew resigned as a Minister for Economic Crime in the Lords, of course. We haven't seen yet the Registration of Overseas Entities Bill on the Scrutiny Committee on which I sat. The Register of Overseas Entities was supposed to be up and running last year, and we are still waiting to see the legislation. Now, I sat in the Joint Pre-Legislative Scrutiny Bill Committee of this legislation, and I dug out the papers from the Bill Committee and our report to refresh my memory this morning. And we made on that committee suggestions to improve the bill, to close loopholes like trusts which could circumvent the bill, to introduce the verification, the lack of which makes the current register at Companies House so utterly useless and full of guff. And the former Conservative Minister, Lord Fox, who chaired the Joint Committee, revealed recently that under the previous Prime Minister, Downing Street lent in him when he tabled amendments to introduce a public register of overseas property owners. And Lord Fox said, I was obviously misled because nothing has subsequently happened. I can only think of a deluded desire to protect the City of London has led to all these delays. It's a real irony that our reputation for protecting the rule of law is one of the things that attracts people who have very little regard for the rule of law themselves and come from countries which ignore it almost altogether. That is the nature of the type of money that is being attracted. Meanwhile, Madam Deputy Speaker, anti-corruption watchdog Transparency International has said that Russians accused of corruption or links to the Kremlin own around £1.5 billion worth of property in Britain. 28% of that property is in the city of Westminster, on the very doorstep of British democracy. Madam Deputy Speaker, this House is united, cross-party, in our support of the Government and of the people of Ukraine. Members across this House want to see more action by way of sanctions on those involved in Putin's regime. But this report rings hollow when this Government has time and time again failed to take action to halt the flow of dirty money through the City of London, tarnishing both credibility and reputation. The Scottish Parliament, Madam Deputy Speaker, does not have the powers to act on this, though my colleagues and I dearly wish that we did. This UK Government have the chance to put that right, and they must do so now without further delay, or the stream of questions as to why not and who